guys, so today I'm bringing you part 2 of my February reviews. Because it was so long, I read 10 books in February, I decided to split it up into 2 videos so they wouldn't be too long for you guys. So these are the next 5 books that I read this month. It's kind of a weird mix. It's books that I absolutely adored, and then books that I also absolutely hated. So my first part was kind of like, yeah, these books were okay, and then now it's gonna be like, I absolutely love this, or this was terrible. So the first book I'm gonna talk about is Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. I read this with Ange and Elena, and we kind of took a really slow pace with this. We only read about 50 pages a day and kind of worked our way through it, and I'm really glad I had them to kind of egg me on to finish it, because I would have given up on this book. It's not a bad book. It's definitely, like, the story is interesting, but there's these really long digressions in it that don't need to be in it, that explain political things, and it's just kind of like, really, Thackeray? You're gonna do this to me for 50 pages? There'd be like 50 pages and I'm like, it was okay. This book was okay. I think if it had been about half the length, I would have absolutely adored it. I think Becky Sharp is a fantastic female character, like just unlikable and kind of conniving and manipulative and absolutely fantastic in that way, and she just owns it. Like, she owns the fact that she's manipulative and she knows she is, and she goes after what she wants, and that's absolutely fantastic. But to get to that, like, it's even hurting my hand just to hold it. It's so long. But I am glad that I finally got it read and got it crossed off my TBR, because I've had this sitting on my shelf for ages. So I finally read it. I finally read Vanity Fair. So, I mean, read it if you kind of, I would suggest doing what I do and going at a slow pace. Because I feel like if you sat down to read it all at once, it would just kind of, I'm really glad I took this at a slow and steady pace and just kind of worked my way through it. It wasn't bad, but it just took forever to get to the point. So now for a book I absolutely loved, and I've actually done a full review, so I'm not going to talk too much about this, and that is Thomas Hardy's The Woodlanders. This is my favorite Hardy so far. It's a bit slower moving in comparison to some of his other works, but I absolutely love it. I think it really does fantastically. Like, Hardy always writes really realistic people, and I feel like this is one of the best examples of that I've read so far. This is basically, it's set in his small, like, Wessex County, in a small, like, woodcutting community. Like, I don't know, it's not logging, because it's not, I mean, for me, logging is like whole-scale cutting, but it deals with the woods, and the woods kind of provides people with their means of employment. And just the main character in this, Grace, is just absolutely fantastic. She's so strong-willed. She's everything I wanted out of every other Hardy female character, like strong female character, and she knows her own mind, but she also gets influenced, but she makes mistakes, and that's okay, because she's you know, I just love this book so much. I will link my full review down below, because I'm trying not to say too much of it, of what I already covered in my like 7-minute long gushing of this novel. Just absolutely adored it. Next up is one I've had on my shelf for a while, and that is Georges Louis Bourget's Brodie's Report. It's a collection of short stories that he wrote later in life. He gave up writing for quite a while, and then, sorry, I'm reading this off the back. After a gap of 20 years, at the age of 70, he wrote these stories. He probably should have not written them. Gonna be entirely honest, I did not enjoy this book at all. I think I made Ange and Yomini laugh because I was talking to them as I was reading it, and I'm like, this is awful. This is just absolutely awful. There's a couple stories in here that are redeeming. I think The Duel and, what's the other one? It's something to do with the Gospel of Mark, I think is what it's called. Yeah, The Gospel According to Mark and The Duel are interesting. The rest of them are just kind of this, like, toxic masculinity that I expected from Hemingway. Like, it's all knife fights and be a man and, you know, stabbing people, and it's just, I'm so glad that this is really short. It was like, I think it was only like 90 pages, and this was harder to get through than Vanity Fair. Let's be entirely honest there. I enjoyed Vanity Fair more than this, despite the couple of redeeming qualities it has. Also, I would say that he writes women terribly, but he barely writes women, so I don't know. Yeah, just not a good introduction to Borges. I don't know if I'm going to continue with trying to read him. I know he's beloved, I realize that, but it just... Somebody tell me if the rest of his stories are like this, because I hated this. Just absolutely hated it. Now on to a book I absolutely loved, and that is Henri de Balzac's Ursule Mirouet. Probably butchered that because my French is terrible, but this basically deals with a small town and a question of inheritance, and it's just... Balzac just writes such sweet, wonderful fiction, and like he deals with complex subject matter. Like, this isn't necessarily a happy story, but it's just, his writing just, it's absolutely beautiful. I read this really quickly and just fell in love with it. This is my second Balzac novel, my first one being Old Goroy, and I just love Balzac. I've since gone out and bought 2 more, breaking my rule of only buying like 1 at a time. To be fair, one of them I found for 1 cent. So yeah, I really like Balzac. This really, like, I enjoyed Old Goroy, but because I read it when I was in Toronto and I read so many other works at that same time, it got a bit overwhelmed by the other works, and I was really glad that I had this and then I read this and kind of, you know, took my time with this one, and it didn't get overwhelmed by so many other pieces of fiction that it just, it's beautiful. It's an absolutely beautiful story if you're interested in getting into like French literature, because I know sometimes, I'm gonna set this down because it's starting to hurt my hand, sometimes reading translated fiction is not the easiest thing to do, because it's really hard to find good translations, and not everything is translated. Like, trust me, I've looked, because I want to read a lot more Zola and I want to read a lot more Balzac, and like trying to find good translations in decent copies that don't cost an arm and a leg, it's hard. Like, even these black spines from Penguin are still $20 Canadian, and I mean, I looked at the Oxfords and they're quite a bit cheaper, but they don't have the whole collection. And I mean, I realize that that's semantics having my collection split up, but I also looked at the translations, and they're like, I think the translations for the Penguins are slightly better. So going through and reading translated fiction is not easy. I understand that. But if you're looking to kind of get into more French fiction, I think Balzac is a great place to start. He writes really realistic, but it's just beautiful. He writes beautiful fiction. So if you haven't read any Balzac, I would definitely recommend this one, or Père Goriot is also another great place to start. So yes, absolutely adored this. And then the last one that I read is Virginia Woolf's Monday or Tuesday. This is a collection of short stories that she published. I think this is a later collection. And this is the first collection of short stories that I've read by her. And it was kind of a bit of a roller coaster. There were some that I feel like with short story collections in general, you either, it's kind of a weird mix, because you'll absolutely love some stories and kind of be like towards others, and you never really give a short story collection a full 5 stars. I find anyway, in the same way that like not in the same way that a novel, I don't react to short stories the same way I do to novels, but I did really enjoy this. There were a couple that I really loved. The Society, or A Society, was really, really great. And sorry, I'm looking at the contents. I really enjoyed Kew Gardens and A Haunted House. The other ones were just kind of, some of them were a bit too short and a bit too out there, but they were much more, I find, experimental than Mrs. Dalloway. I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading these to start with Virginia Woolf. I would say probably start with Mrs. Dalloway. I think that's a really good entry point for Woolf, but I did really enjoy these. I think it was a solid 3-star read, just because of the kind of inconsistencies in the stories. But yeah, definitely interesting. I was glad I got this off my shelf, or like got this off my TBR, because I've had it sitting there for so long and I've kind of ignored it. Like it's just one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it eventually. And I had an afternoon and it was between buddy reads and I thought, you know, this is quite short. I'm just gonna pick it up and read it. And it was quite lovely. So that's the last of my February reviews. I hope you guys enjoyed these videos. Let me know if you guys prefer these kind of reviews, like the batch reviews or individual reviews. I've kind of started to do more individual reviews just because there's some books that I want to talk a lot about, and I have a lot to say about. So I'm trying to do a couple more of those like during the month. So let me know if you kind of like this kind of combination or if you prefer one over the other. And I will see you guys in another video. Bye.